Hello all, my name is Jacob Starks and I am an undergraduate in the Honors College at the University of Oklahoma. And along with Lynn Guo, Janet K. Allen, and Farouk Mistry, this is Quantifying Social Drivers for Policy Recommendations. Income inequality is a major issue in India. Despite rapid urbanization and rising standard of living, in many of the rural villages where farming is still the primary form of income, there is extreme levels of poverty. As a result, these communities are a major target for developmental policy by both the government and social entrepreneurs in India to raise the standard of living across the country. However, sustainable development has three different primary drivers: economic, environmental, and social. Economic factors are the most easily quantifiable and directly quantifiable because factors like the income that one's able to bring in, the expenses that they incur, the labor they have to output in order to bring in that kind of income are all directly measurable and easy to gauge the impact of policy on. Unlike that, environmental and social factors are far more indirectly quantifiable or qualitative in nature. Factors like the level of air pollution and water quality are both measurable, but it's hard to correlate exactly how that influences an individual's decision making. Similarly, social factors such as access to education and literacy, overall happiness, are things that can be quantified, but in a very limited fashion that does not directly relate to the decisions that they're making. As a result, these are not really the factors that end up getting focused on when addressing developmental policy. The economic factors become the primary measure of developmental policy. However, economic policy is only predominant up to a certain level of self-sufficiency, at which point environmental and social factors can become significantly more important. For example, in the survey data that was collected, the most important drive that most villagers showed was that they wanted to be able to stay with their family. And the only reason they were willing to leave was simply because they could not bring enough income to sustain being able to stay with their family and make ends meet. In order to quantify these qualitative drivers, we've used survey data, allowing for the comparison of social drivers that are qualitative in nature to more directly quantitative ones, such as these economic factors. And in doing so, we've allowed us to gauge the relative importance of social drivers on individual choices. Additionally, we aggregated disparate data, such as the total crop yield, which is a function of a number of various factors, some of which can be controlled, such as the number of crops planted or the amounts of an individual crop that are planted, and others that can't be and are purely environmental, such as soil quality, the amount of rain that these resources might have access to, or the drainage conditions of the ground. And we've worked together to develop aggregate curves of performance across a handful of villages for these kinds of factors. This has allowed us to develop indices of drivers and functions to help us predict network interactions. As a result, we could then use these indices to generate or modify behavioral rules in simulation, allowing for a simulation of the social effects on economic behavioral decisions in an idealized model. On the right, you can see the state chart for that model of how we idealize that individuals might act throughout farming in a year, where on the right side is the more traditional path, where there is a rainy season in which people will choose to farm when water and other farming resources are abundant. And then in the dry season, when they aren't, you'll have migration to cities and larger towns in which workers will seek seasonal trade type jobs to make ends meet. However, through either promotion with either direct economic incentives or stimulating these kinds of social and environmental drivers, we hope to encourage these villagers to adopt the path on the left, where there is still an initial season of farming. However, there's also a second season of farming that occurs during the dry season, because villagers are willing to invest in either purchasing water for farming or maintaining and developing pumps such that they can access the groundwater reserves that they have on their land for a second season of farming, which is a more desirable path because it allows them to stay with their family and help improve the village without needing to migrate elsewhere. And on the right side, on the left side here, you can see some of the parameters that we've used, both idealized based off assumptions and incorporating survey data to simulate not only the individual behavioral decisions of each farmer, but a number of different interactions that they might have in between them, both the social kinds of interactions in red and proximity-based interactions of farmers whose fields are near each other in black. Through repeated simulation, what we have seen is that policy does not actually affect long-term trends. What policy can do is accelerate behavioral shifts, as you can see in the graphs to the right, where on the y-axis is the number of farmers choosing any individual path, where you can see that over time, the number of farmers that choose to migrate does decline, while the number of farmers who are choosing to adopt a second season of farming, whether they are on the green line and profiting or fail to profit in the red line, is an overall increase over time. What we can see, however, is that social policy accelerates this because in the short term, all the costs of infrastructure that limit and make it unaffordable for individuals to adopt and are a burden initially can be mitigated via subsidies, which can allow, in some cases, us to reach 90% adoption among the village in 50% less time, which is extremely significant. However, what we can also infer from this is that long-term policy success and adoption of methods is not itself dependent on the policy, but most importantly are the social interactions and drivers behind those policies. As you can see here, because this is accelerating policies and choices that individuals would naturally make, it is extremely effective. However, conversely, if you have a policy that in the short term stimulates something that individuals do not have a natural driver to move towards, it won't be successful simply because over time, once the incentives in the short term wear off for individuals to adopt, they will simply shift back to their original patterns. Finally, the primary insight that I took away from this is that just because something is measurable does not make it easy to model or predict. We had a significant amount of qualitative data that we had access to. However, how to compare that to quantitative data and how to accurately model how changes in that qualitative data resulted in changes in quantitative data was extremely difficult to model and predict. However, through simulation, we can idealize how those choices might have an effect. Finally, I would like to thank the Honors College Research Assistant Program for helping to fund this research, and the employees and social entrepreneurs at Sun Moksha in India for helping to collect the survey data from which the indices used for this modeling were derived. Thank you for listening to my presentation and have a great day.